Let me tell you something that may sound counterintuitive to your conditioned mind. You do not need to shout your desires to the universe for them to be heard. In fact, it is in the moments of utter stillness, when the ego retreats, when the mind falls silent, that life begins to listen. We have been fooled into thinking that making noise, pushing harder, doing more, is the only way to achieve, to attract, to manifest. But the real secret, everything you are chasing is already making its way to you, if you could just be silent long enough to receive it. Why should you listen to this to the very end? Because right now you are living in a world that drowns in its own noise, and you need a moment of clarity, of remembering, a whisper from the soul that tells you you don't need to hustle for what's already yours. You just need to align and allow. We speak because we fear the void. We fill every silence with sound, as if the quiet was something to be conquered. But silence isn't empty. It is filled with everything that matters. In silence, you become aware, not of what you want, but of what you already are. And it is this awareness that magnetizes everything you think you must chase. When you are silent, you are not inactive. You are deeply active internally. You are a tuning fork for the rhythm of life. In silence, your being is not screaming, "Give me!" It is simply whispering, "I am ready." And that readiness is more powerful than demand. Think of the seed in the soil. It does not shout to the sky, "Make me a tree." It simply remains still, drawing in the light, the water, the nutrients, growing in its own time, and yet it becomes something magnificent. So why do you resist the stillness that nature itself thrives in? We often mistake movement for progress. We think we must always be doing to be deserving. But some of the most profound shifts happen when you sit in silence with your soul. In that space, you stop reacting and start attracting. What you desperately chase tends to escape you. But when you are calm, centered, and quiet, you draw it in, not because you begged for it, but because you became the kind of person who holds space for it. Silence is the gateway to alignment. And alignment is the real force behind attraction. There's a subtle arrogance in constantly trying to control everything. But the wise know control is an illusion. We are not here to manage the tides. You are here to trust them, to let life bring in what is meant when it is meant. And this can only be done from the calmness of silence. For the silence that waits with anxiety, much the silence that waits with faith. The loudest thing in the room isn't always the most powerful. Think of the mountain. It says nothing, yet it dominates the landscape. Think of the stars, they shine in silence, but guide the lost. Think of love. It's not proven by words, but felt in presence. This is the strength of silence. So, stop feeling the need to constantly explain yourself, to prove yourself, to chase validation. Sit with yourself, breathe, align, and let the world come to you. There's a soft magic in the silent soul. It does not ask, it knows. It does not chase, it becomes. And in becoming, everything it needs flows to it, naturally. Remember this, you do not become powerful by being loud. You become powerful by being still enough to hear the truth moving through you. Be silent, and everything, yes, everything, will come to you. Silence is not absence, it is presence in its purest form. When most people think of silence, they imagine a void, a space where nothing is happening. But that's only because they've been taught to equate noise with significance, motion with progress, and words with wisdom. In truth, silence is not a lack of something. It is the foundation beneath everything. It is not empty, it is full of clarity, awareness, connection, and deep insight. And more than that, it is alive, vibrantly alive. You must understand that silence is not the opposite of sound, but its source. Every note in a symphony arises from it and returns to it. Every meaningful word you've ever spoken gained its power not from itself, but from the silence that surrounded it. This is how silence works. It gives depth, it gives resonance. Without it, everything becomes noise, chaotic, hollow, meaningless. Most of us are running from silence not because it is boring, but because it is honest. Silence has no distractions. It holds up a mirror and says, "Look." In it you are faced with yourself, without your accomplishments, your titles, your social masks, just you. And that's uncomfortable for a mind that has been conditioned to define itself through external motion. But within that discomfort lies the very doorway to peace, power, and presence. When you sit in silence, really sit in it, not just the absence of words, but the quieting of the mind, something profound begins to unfold. You become aware of how noisy your inner world truly is. The constant mental chatter, the anxiety, the overthinking. And you also begin to see how much of your suffering isn't from what's happening outside, but from your resistance to what's happening inside. Silence teaches you that your power does not come from force or control or explanation. It comes from your ability to remain centered in the midst of noise. Not reactive, not frantic, but grounded. This is presence. This is when life starts to work differently. When people begin to feel drawn to you, not because you're doing something special, but because you carry a calmness they don't understand. You become magnetic, not loud, unshakable, not rigid. You begin to see that silence is the language of the soul. And when you learn to listen, not just to others, but to yourself, to the deep current within, you find answers that no external voice could ever give you. You realize that the wisdom you seek is not out there. It's always been here, beneath the surface, waiting for you to be still enough to hear it. In a world that constantly demands your attention, your response, your opinion, silence is rebellion. Not a rebellion of resistance, but of remembering that you are not here to be consumed by chaos. You are here to be rooted in awareness, to respond from depth, not impulse, to be present in the now, not lost in the noise of the past or the illusions of the future. You'll notice that the more you embrace silence, the less you need to speak to be understood. Your presence does the talking. Your energy communicates more than your words ever could. And when you do speak, your words carry weight, not because of their volume, but because of their origin. They come from stillness, not ego, from alignment, not insecurity. So do not fear silence, do not run from it or try to fill it. Sit in it, welcome it, and watch how everything begins to come into focus. The clarity, the inspiration, the peace, even the answers to questions you didn't know you were asking. All of it begins to rise slowly but surely from the still waters of presence. Because silence is not absence. It is presence in its highest form. It is not the lack of life. It is where life finally begins to speak. And if you can just be quiet enough, still enough, you will realize that everything you've been chasing has been quietly waiting for you in that space all along. The universe does not respond to noise. It responds to alignment. This truth may not sound glamorous because we've been raised in a world that glorifies loudness, loud ambition, loud success, loud opinions. We are taught that to get anything done, we must declare, demand, and dominate. But real power doesn't shout. It doesn't clamor for attention. It flows naturally, quietly, purposefully. Alignment is not about activity. It is about being tuned to the rhythm of life. And just as a radio must be precisely adjusted to catch the right frequency, so must we learn to align ourselves with a deeper order that is already present beneath the chaos. Most people try to force things into being. They chase, they struggle, they try to bend life to their will. But what they don't realize is that force only creates resistance. The harder you push, the more life pushes back. Noise comes from desperation. It's the ego screaming, "I need this to happen now." Alignment, however, is silent confidence. It doesn't rush because it trusts the process. When you are aligned, when your thoughts, intentions, emotions, and actions are in harmony, you become like a magnet. You don't chase after life. Life flows toward you. Look at nature. The sun doesn't rise in a hurry, yet everything depends on it. The tides do not crash in frantic waves. They follow a silent pool of the moon. The seasons change in quiet precision. There's no announcement. In the same way, when you align yourself with the deeper intelligence of life, you don't need to shout for your blessings. They are already moving toward you. But to align, you must first quiet the noise within, the endless thoughts, the fears, the comparisons, the urgency. None of that aligns you. It distorts you. Imagine trying to tune an instrument while someone is shouting in your ear. It's impossible. You can't hear the note. You can't find the harmony. This is what happens when you allow your mind to be filled with noise. You become deaf to the intuitive guidance life is constantly offering you. You must be ma'ima. Silence, then, becomes the space where alignment begins. It allows the noise to settle so the truth can rise. In silence, you stop asking life to obey your ego, and instead you begin to feel where life is already flowing. You shift from forcing to allowing, from confusion to clarity, from resistance to readiness. Alignment doesn't mean life will always move at your pace. It means you move with life, not against it. You begin to trust that delays are not denials, that what doesn't happen isn't a failure, it's redirection. And in this state of surrender, a deep peace emerges, a peace that doesn't come from everything going right, but from knowing you are right where you need to be. So many people are exhausted not because they're doing too much, but because they're misaligned. They are climbing ladders that lean against the wrong wall. They are making noise in places where silence is needed. They're speaking when they should be listening. They are chasing what isn't meant for them, while what is meant for them stands patiently by, waiting for their stillness. When you align, opportunities find you. Right people, right timing, right energy, they appear, not because you forced them, but because you were finally tuned to receive them. And it's not magic, it's presence, it's awareness. It's the deep intelligence of the universe responding not to your volume, but to your vibration. To live in alignment is to live in trust, not passive waiting, but active awareness. You move not because you're afraid of standing still, but because the movement arises from within, organically. You speak not to be heard, but because you have something true to say. You act not to prove something, but because action itself has become a reflection of your truth. The universe doesn't reward noise, it responds to harmony. And harmony is born in silence, sustained in presence, and revealed through alignment. So stop trying to yell your way into your destiny. Tune yourself, quietly, patiently, and watch as life begins to rise to meet you. Silence is power, misunderstood. People often confuse silence with weakness, submission, or the inability to respond, but true silence, conscious, intentional silence, is not born out of fear, it is born out of strength. It is not the silence of those who are defeated, but the silence of those who have nothing to prove. The world has conditioned us to believe that power must always be expressed outwardly, that to be heard we must raise our voices, that to win we must argue, that to be respected we must dominate a room. But real power doesn't need to speak. Real power is presence. It commands without commanding. It commands without command. There's a reason the wisest people often speak the least. They have discovered that most words are used not to communicate truth, but to protect ego, to control perception, or to fill the awkward space of not knowing. But the truly powerful have no need to convince anyone of who they are. Their energy, their stillness, their silence already says everything. When you are silent, especially in situations where others expect noise, defense, retaliation, validation, you disrupt the pattern. You introduce stillness into a storm. And that stillness makes others uneasy, not because it's empty, but because it is full of control, full of awareness, full of a kind of confidence that doesn't require an audience. Have you ever noticed how uncomfortable people get around silence? How quickly they try to fill it with words, jokes, opinions? That's because silence removes all the masks. It reveals what's underneath. And most people are afraid of what they'll find there. But those who understand silence don't fear it. They trust it. They use it. They allow it to speak for them. Silence is not passive. It is one of the most active forces available to the awakened mind. It listens, it observes, it processes, it penetrates. When others are too busy reacting, The silent one is reading the energy in the room, feeling the weight of words before responding, and when they finally do speak, their words are heard, not because they're loud, but because they're rare, because they emerge from depth, not impulse. The misunderstood nature of silence also shows up in relationships, conflict, and leadership. Many think that being loud wins arguments, that shouting the most gets the last word. But a calm, measured silence often defeats the most aggressive noise. Why? Because it shows that you are not pulled into the chaos. You have not been emotionally kidnapped. You are grounded, composed, sovereign. Power lies in restraint, in not needing to fight every battle, in knowing when to speak and when to let silence carry the message, in trusting that sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all, that not responding doesn't mean you lost. It means you've evolved beyond the need to play the game. Silence also gives you the advantage of clarity. When you're not constantly speaking, you're observing. You're listening, not just to words, but to tone, energy, intention. You see what others miss. You sense truths that are never spoken. And that makes you dangerous in the best possible way. Not because you're manipulative, but because you're aware, fully, sharply aware. In a world that worships visibility, those who master silence become invisible by choice. They don't chase the spotlight. They don't seek applause. And yet they often become the most influential, not because of what they say, but because of the presence they bring. Their silence becomes a mirror, reflecting back everyone else's noise. Their stillness becomes a lighthouse in a world drowning in chatter. So if people misunderstand your silence, let them. If they think you're weak because you don't always react, let them. You're not here to meet their expectations. You're here to master yourself. And silence is one of your greatest teachers. It teaches patience. It teaches control. It teaches you to listen deeply, not just to others, but to your own inner voice. And when you begin to understand its depth, you realize something profound. You were never weak for staying silent. You were simply powerful in a language they hadn't learned yet. Stillness reveals what haste hides. In our rushed attempts to find answers, solve problems, or achieve success, we often miss the most vital truths. Not because they're not there, but because we're moving too fast to see them. The modern world glorifies speed. We're constantly urged to move quickly, speak quickly, decide quickly, as if speed were a sign of intelligence or mastery. But in truth, the most profound realizations, the most meaningful insights, don't arrive in motion. They arrive in stillness. When you are still, you begin to see with clarity what was once obscured by the fog of urgency. Haste clouds perception. It narrows vision. It makes you reactive rather than responsive. But stillness opens the space between thought and action. It gives you time to feel, to observe, to know, not just intellectually, but intuitively. In that still space, the noise of the world fades, and what is essential rises to the surface. So many people are in a constant state of pursuit, chasing validation, relationships, opportunities, even peace, believing that if they just run a little faster, they'll finally catch what they're looking for. But the paradox is this: what you're chasing often runs because you're chasing. The energy of desperation creates resistance. The universe doesn't respond to frantic energy. It responds to alignment. And alignment is born in stillness. When you sit in stillness, when you allow yourself to pause without filling the silence with distraction, something remarkable happens. Your mind begins to settle. The storm of thoughts loses momentum. And in that calm, you begin to notice details you never saw before. Like a pond. When the water is stirred, you can't see the bottom. But when the water is still, the reflection becomes clear. Your mind works the same way. In the noise of hurry and hustle, your thoughts are stirred up, racing, colliding, unclear. But in stillness, they settle. And what was hidden beneath the surface, your intuition, your inner knowing, your wisdom, becomes visible. And this is why some of the greatest shifts in life happen not in action but in reflection. Decisions that once felt impossible become obvious after a moment of silence. Paths that seemed blurred are illuminated when you stop trying to force your way forward. Stillness doesn't just give you rest, it gives you insight. But make no mistake, stillness is not laziness. It's not avoidance. It's not passivity. True stillness is presence without movement. It is alert. It is aware. It is deeply engaged with life, not through reaction, but through observation. It's the kind of engagement that allows you to respond with wisdom rather than impulse. When you're hasty, you may appear productive, but you often move in the wrong direction. You say things you don't mean. You make promises you can't keep. You take on burdens that were never yours. But stillness guards you from that. It gives you space to ask, is this true for me? Is this necessary? Is this mine to carry? In relationships, stillness reveals the emotional undercurrents that get drowned in arguments. In silence, you can feel what someone truly means, even when their words say otherwise. In solitude, you discover your real needs, not the ones society sold you, but the ones your soul has whispered all along. And in times of confusion, stillness doesn't bring instant clarity, but it prepares you for it. It makes room for answers to arise organically, without pressure. We are so conditioned to believe that if we're not moving, we're falling behind. But the truth is, movement without awareness is just as dangerous as stillness without intention. It is not enough to act. We must act from alignment. And alignment is not found in noise, it is found in the quiet, in the pause, in the moment you stop searching and start listening. It is not maya, mayata. It is not maya. If life feels chaotic, if the answers seem far away, if you're tired of running, be still. Not because you've given up, but because you're finally ready to receive. Let stillness show you what haste has hidden. Let it bring you back to what is real, what is true, what is already within you. Because in that sacred quiet, you may find that what you were chasing was never out there. It was always waiting for you to slow down and see. Desperation repels, calm invites. This is one of the most subtle yet powerful truths in life. When you operate from a place of desperation, you emit an energy of lack. You're not simply asking the universe for something. broadcasting that you don't already have it, and worse, that you don't trust you ever will. That energy pushes what you want further away, not because the world is cruel, but because the frequency of desperation is rooted in fear, and fear distorts your ability to receive. Think about it. When someone is desperate for your attention, your approval, your love, does that pull you closer? Or do you instinctively lean away? You feel overwhelmed, pressured, suffocated. It's the same with the energy you send out into the world. When you try to attract something from a place of emotional hunger, that energy is felt, even if it's not seen. The world, people, opportunities, consciously or not, sense that desperation and withdraw. Now contrast that with calm. Calm is not passive. It is presence. It is rooted. It is the unshakable knowing that everything is unfolding as it should, even if you don't understand it yet. Calm doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It doesn't panic. It prepares. It aligns. It trusts. And this kind of energy is magnetic. It draws people in. It makes life soften and open around you, not because you're forcing it, but because you've created the space for it to flow toward you. Calmness is a declaration of faith, not in some distant idea of success, but in the rhythm of life itself. It says, I don't need to scream because I know what's mine is coming. I don't need to prove because I already am. And in that quiet confidence, the universe responds, not out of pity, but out of resonance. The irony is, the more you need something, the more vital it seems, the more likely you are to push it away by the way you pursue it. You chase love, and it eludes you. You chase validation, and it escapes. You chase money, and it slips through your fingers. Not because these things are wrong, but because your attachment to them is loud. And loudness speaks of doubt. Calmness, on the other hand, speaks of trust. And trust is irresistible. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. If you are desperate, you attract chaos. If you are calm, you attract clarity. If you are needy, you attract withholding. If you are full within, you draw in overflow. That is the law, not of mysticism, but of energy. Everything is vibration, and desperation is a jagged, anxious vibration. Calm is smooth, clear, receptive. It doesn't mean you don't act. It doesn't mean you sit idle, waiting for things to fall into your lap. Calmness isn't laziness. It is intelligent action. It is movement without frenzy. It is speaking with intention, not insecurity. It is doing what needs to be done and letting go of the rest. The outcome, the result, the recognition, that's not your domain. Your job is the alignment, the state of being from which all else flows. When you want something deeply, a goal, a relationship, a breakthrough, ask yourself, am I holding this from fear or from faith? Is my energy one of hunger or one of harmony? Because the difference will not only shape what you attract, it will shape who you become. Calmness doesn't guarantee that everything will happen on your timeline, but it does ensure that what comes will come without resistance. It will come naturally as a reflection of the peace you've cultivated within. And even if it doesn't come exactly as you imagined, you will be grounded enough to recognize that sometimes not getting what you wanted is the clearest sign of protection. Desperation says, I need this, or I'm not enough. Calm says, whether it comes or not, I remain whole. And in that wholeness, life begins to bring you not what you begged for, but what you're truly ready for. Release the panic. Release the chase. Breathe. Come back to center. Return to the calm truth of your being, and watch how everything begins, not to flee, but to find you. The greatest transformations happen in the quiet, not in the noise, not in the spotlight, not in the moments when the world is watching, but in the unseen hours when no one is clapping, no one is validating, and no one who even knows what you're going through. Transformation is not an event. It is not loud. It is not glamorous. It's subtle. It happens in the silence, where your former self is shedding and your true self is beginning to emerge. Consider the seed underground. It doesn't announce its growth. It doesn't seek applause for cracking open, for growing roots, for reaching toward the light. It simply transforms in darkness, in silence, in solitude. It is not weakness that brings it there, but wisdom. It knows that before anything can bloom outwardly, it must be nurtured inwardly. And so must you. When you're growing, really growing, it often feels like nothing is happening. You may feel stuck, lost, unsure. But in that still space, where the world seems to pause, your spirit is being restructured. Patterns are breaking, beliefs are shifting, old versions of yourself are dissolving. These are the growing pains of becoming, and they require silence, not noise, stillness, not speed. Growth doesn't need to be witnessed to be real. In fact, most real change begins when you stop performing, stop proving, and simply start listening. Listening to your pain, your fatigue, your confusion, and letting it teach you. Listening to the voice that doesn't scream, but whispers gently in the quiet corners of your soul. That voice doesn't flatter you. It doesn't feed your ego. It simply tells you the truth you've been running from in the noise. There is a sacred space that opens when you're no longer trying to be seen, when you're no longer broadcasting your healing or chasing validation for your efforts. That space is where the shift happens. It's where your thoughts slow down, where your emotions start to settle, where you meet yourself as you are, without judgment or pretense. And that is where the real work begins. You may not be able to show the world what's happening inside you. You may not have evidence yet, no results to point to, nothing measurable to prove your transformation. But that doesn't mean it's not real. Some of the most life-altering shifts happen long before anything on the outside changes. Your values begin to shift. Your tolerance for chaos decreases. Your need for validation weakens. Your sensitivity to peace increases. These things are invisible, but they're monumental. In the quiet, you start to see clearly who you've been and who you no longer wish to be. You realize the masks you've worn, the identities you've clung to, and the expectations that were never yours to carry. And as you release them, something miraculous begins to take root. Not a new version of yourself, but a more authentic one. This is why solitude matters. Not because it isolates you, but because it strips away the noise long enough for you to hear what you truly need. And often, it's in those quiet, lonely nights that you realize your resilience. It's in the absence of praise that you discover your self-worth. It's in the silence of uncertainty that you meet your deepest courage. And when the transformation is complete, when the internal shifts are solidified, when the roots have taken hold, you will emerge. And when the transformation is complete, you are the first of witnesses. You noticed and summarize, not pay, be careful, not quick, not much, not at nor, not pay, be careful, not quick. You look different, walk different, speak differently, choose differently, because you are no longer driven by who you were pretending to be. You are now moved by who you truly are. If you are in a season of silence, of stillness, of solitude, trust it. Don't rush it. Don't curse it. Respect it. Because in this sacred quiet, the greatest transformation of your life may be unfolding. And when it is done, when the time is right, you will emerge not as someone who is made in the noise, but as someone who is refined in the silence. And that kind of transformation, the one done in secret, is the kind that lasts forever. Let go of control and become a vessel. This is one of the hardest truths for the modern mind to accept. We are taught from an early age that control equals safety, that the more tightly we manage the outcomes, the better our lives will be. We set rigid expectations, plan meticulously, and hold on tightly to people, to identities, to timelines. But in doing so, we exhaust ourselves. Because the truth is, control is an illusion, and the more we cling to it, the more we block the flow of life. There is a profound difference between direction and control. You can move with purpose, act with intention, and still allow life to move through you, rather than constantly trying to bend it to your will. Becoming a vessel doesn't mean becoming passive. It means becoming open. It means shifting from resistance to receptivity, from force to flow. It's the realization that you are not the river, you are the cup. The river moves through you, and your only task is to stay open, to remain present, to hold what comes without clinging. Letting go of control doesn't mean abandoning your goals or giving up your dreams. It means loosening your grip on how those things must come to you. When you're fixated on only one path, one outcome, one method, you blind yourself to the infinite ways life could bless you. You may pray for strength, and life offers you silence, so you can find it within. You may seek love, and life first gives you solitude to teach you self-worth. But if you're too busy controlling the how, you will miss the wisdom hidden in the what. Cratius, one of the famous anti-Calvinists, said that control is rooted in fear. It says, if I don't manage everything, everything will fall apart. But what if the very act of managing is what's causing the disconnection? What if life doesn't need you to micromanage every detail, but to trust it, to trust yourself, to trust the process? When you become a vessel, you stop trying to be the sculptor and become the clay. It's willing to be shaped by something greater than your limited perspective. This doesn't mean life will always feel comfortable. In fact, letting go of control can feel terrifying at first. It's like stepping into the unknown without a map. But that unknown is where the sacred lives. It's where transformation happens. It's where your deepest potential is revealed, not by planning your way into it, but by surrendering to it. You think of how nature works. A tree doesn't control the rain, it simply opens when it arrives. The flower doesn't command the sun, it blooms when the light touches it. They don't resist, they don't strategize, they align. And in doing so, they thrive. In the same way, your role is not to control every outcome, but to remain open to every possibility, to receive what's meant for you, not just with your hands, but with your whole being. Being a vessel means being fluid. When things change, and they will, you don't break, you bend. You don't collapse, you adapt. And in that fluidity, you discover a deeper strength. Not the strength of force, but the strength of surrender. Not the kind of power that clenches its fists, but the kind that opens its hands and says, I trust what's coming. There's a peace that comes from this shift, a stillness. You stop overthinking every decision. You stop obsessing over timelines. You stop chasing validation. Because now, instead of chasing, you're receiving. Instead of fearing the unknown, you're making space for it. And ironically, when you let go of control, you gain something far greater, influence. Not over others, but over your own state of being. You learn to move from alignment, not anxiety. If you feel like you're drowning in pressure, constantly trying to hold it all together, ask yourself, what am I so afraid will happen if I let go? And then gently, slowly, begin to loosen your grip. Trust that life isn't working against you. Trust that you are not alone. Trust that in your surrender, in your openness, you are not becoming weaker, you are becoming ready. Ready to be filled, ready to be led, ready to become the version of yourself that only surrender could awaken. Because when you finally become the vessel, life begins to pour into you in ways control never could. Patience born in silence is not waiting, it's preparing. Most people misunderstand patience. They think it means simply sitting still doing nothing and hoping something good will eventually come. But real patience, the kind that transforms your life, is not passive, it's deeply active beneath the surface. It's not just the absence of action, it's the presence of trust, alignment, and quiet inner work. And that kind of patience is only born in silence. When you are truly silent, not just on the outside, but within your mind, your emotions, your expectations, you create space. You begin to feel the subtle movements of life. You start noticing what's shifting inside you, what's no longer true for you, and what is slowly rising to take its place. Silence isn't stagnation. It's the sacred stillness in which your spirit rearranges itself. It's the dark, fertile soil where unseen seeds are cracking open and rooting deeper before they ever sprout above ground. This is the nature of real preparation. It's invisible at first. You might feel like nothing is happening. You may even think you're stuck, behind, or lost. but something profound is taking place. You are being readied for something greater. Your thoughts are being sharpened. Your emotions are being refined. Your intentions are becoming clearer. Life is giving you time, not to wait, but to become. Think about it. Before any great breakthrough, there is always a pause, a quiet before the rise, a winter before the spring. That pause isn't failure. It isn't punishment. It's grace. It's the moment life gives you to shed old layers before stepping into new ones. But if you rush it, if you try to force the flower to bloom before it's ready, you destroy the very thing you're trying to create. Silence teaches you this. It teaches you to listen to life, to your own soul, to the wisdom that doesn't come from words but from stillness. In that listening, patience is born, and not the kind that grits its teeth and waits in frustration. No, this is patience that trusts. Patience that says, I may not know when it's coming, but I know something is. This patience is not idle. It's alive with awareness. It's tuned in. It's watchful, not restless. It's preparing itself without needing to announce the preparation. And that's what most people miss. They think that just because they're not acting externally, nothing's being done. But your readiness doesn't always look like progress. Sometimes it looks like solitude. It looks like reflection. It looks like quiet, disciplined consistency. Repeating small inner shifts until something big aligns. The world may not see it, but you will feel it. Patience born in silence changes how you move. You stop rushing into relationships that don't resonate. You stop jumping at every opportunity just to feel busy. You stop forcing outcomes and start allowing alignment. You learn to move with intention, not out of fear of being left behind. You don't just wait the light to happen. You become the kind of person who is ready when it does. There is great power in this, because while others are exhausting themselves chasing what's not meant for them, you are building quiet strength. You are learning endurance, discernment, and inner peace. And when the right moment finally comes, because it always does, you won't be scrambling to catch up. You will meet it with grace, with clarity, with a calm knowing that you were never waiting. You were preparing all along. And here's the secret. The more prepared you are, the less you have to chase. The more deeply rooted your patience, the more effortlessly things begin to unfold. Not because you forced them, but because you became truly ready. Ready in mind, ready in heart, ready in energy. So don't be ashamed of your quiet seasons. Don't rush through the silence just to feel like you're doing something. Sit in it. Let it shape you. Let it clean out the noise. Let it stretch your inner capacity. Because real patience, the kind that prepares, not just waits, is a sign of trust. And trust is a signal to life that you're open, grounded, and becoming exactly who you need to be for what's coming. You're not being delayed, you're being developed. And in the silence, if you listen closely enough, you'll hear the subtle signs. The shift is already on its way. Silence is the sacred space between you and your destiny. It is not a pause in the journey. It is the journey. In a world that constantly pushes you to act, speak, prove, and perform, silence becomes a radical form of self-alignment. It is the invisible bridge between who you are now and who you are becoming. Not because you're doing nothing, but because in silence you begin to listen, and in that listening you find the direction that no amount of noise could ever reveal. There is something holy about silence. It doesn't shout. It doesn't entertain. It doesn't try to impress. It simply holds space for truth, for clarity, for transformation. Most people rush through life without ever entering this space. So some has to make rushing shape. Yeah. Some that simply rush through life without ever entering this space. They are too busy filling the air with opinions, defending themselves, explaining, reacting, controlling. And in that constant reaction, they miss the subtle invitations life is always offering. Quiet nudges from the soul that say, this way, not that. Destiny does not unfold in chaos. It's revealed in the quiet, just beyond the mind's obsession with control. It speaks in still moments, in the spaces between distractions. That's why silence is not a void. It's a vessel, a container for insight. When you enter it with presence, you begin to hear what you were too loud to hear before. Not just the world around you, but the voice within you, the one that knows, the one that remembers. You see, there are parts of your destiny that will never be revealed through effort alone. You can plan, work, strive, but some things only rise when you become still enough to receive them. Just like a lake reflects the sky, only when the water is calm, your future becomes clearer when your inner world is quiet. That reflection, that guidance, that deep sense of knowing, it's always there, but you must meet it in silence. The sacred space of silence is not empty. It is full of everything that matters. It's where your soul stretches its legs and your spirit begins to breathe again. It's where your real questions live. Not the ones you perform for others, but the ones you quietly carry inside. Who am I? What am I here to do? What truly matters to me? And the answers? They are not shouted. They rise like mist, slowly, gently, but only when you're still enough to notice. Silence humbles you. It reminds you that you don't need to chase your destiny. It's already seeking you. But it cannot reach you through the noise of fear, distraction, and ego. It reaches you through resonance. And resonance happens when you are quiet enough to feel what's meant for you, instead of constantly forcing what isn't. Some of the most powerful shifts in your life will begin in moments of silence, a realization, a release, a decision made not in pressure, but in peace. That's where destiny pivots. Not in grand gestures, but in quiet clarity. And once you feel it, once you glimpse that deeper path, everything else changes. You move differently. You stop chasing timelines that aren't yours. You stop comparing your journey to anyone else's. Because now you're tuned into something real, something eternal. But silence takes courage. It asks you to step away from the noise, from the rush, from the need to be seen or understood. It invites you to meet yourself fully. And that can be confronting, because in silence, and there is no one to blame, no distractions to hide behind, just you, raw and real, standing at the edge of your own truth. Yet this is where your destiny waits. Not in the applause, not in the recognition, but in the moment you finally drop the masks and listen. Listen to the ache, the longing, the knowing. Listen to what calls you, not because it's popular, but because it's yours. That calling isn't found in a crowd. It's found in solitude, in presence, in sacred silence. So do not fear the quiet. Enter it. Make room for it. Let it strip away what no longer serves you. Let it guide you back to your center. Because once you honor that space, once you begin to dwell in it rather than escape from it, you will find that the silence between you and your destiny isn't distance. It's preparation. It's alignment. It's the very language your future uses to find its way home to you. Silence is not emptiness. It is alignment, power, and presence. It is the sacred ground where your transformation begins, your truth emerges, and your destiny finds you. You are never meant to chase life with frantic noise. You were meant to meet it with quiet clarity. The world may tell you to speak louder, move faster, prove harder, but the wisdom you seek does not live in the noise. It lives in the space where control is surrendered, and in the calm where your soul begins to breathe. When you choose silence, you choose to trust. When you stop reacting, you start becoming. And in that becoming, everything you once chased begins to turn and move toward you. Not because you forced it, but because you finally made space for it. Be still, be silent, and watch as the life meant for you begins to unfold, not with noise, but with quiet certainty. Everything is already on its way. Just listen, just wait, just be.